Hello, everybody. Yevi here with a review for the Conklin Duraflex. Now, this is just going to be a Conklin Durograph with the OmniFlex nib, as shown here on the sticker on the box itself. Typical Conklin packaging. I got number 67 of 300. If you look, it is a very nice blue faux leather box with gold stitching and the Conklin logo embossed on the top of the box. Opening the box, we have a Conklin Durograph fitted with the OmniFlex nib, making it the Conklin Duraflex. And underneath the pen, we have the instructions, as well as one blue and one black standard international cartridge, the short ones, of course. So putting the box up here for a second, let's look at the pen. So you can already see it's a good gloss black. And on the center band there, you can see where it says Conklin. And flip it over. Durograph with the Conklin Crescent Moon logo. It's a very good finish to the pen. It also has Conklin established 1898 there on the finial, which is a very good touch. It's a nice, smooth, black, classy pen, not too flashy. So taking a look at the nib here, we have the Conklin, Jaffa OmniFlex nib. Now, as you can see, the flex really comes from where they cut the fins. And that is both a blessing and a curse. It does give the pen some flex, but because of where the flex is, I did spring one of the nibs before writing the review. Now, looking at the length and the weight, it actually feels really good in the hand, as does every Conklin Durograph pen. One of the other great features, though, and taking the pen apart here, is the converter that comes with the Conklin Durograph. It is a screw-in converter, which is a good thing because that means you're not going to be dropping the converter into the bottle when you ink it up. You can see the threads there on the plastic converter. And it does take quite a few screws to get in there, and it does sit pretty tight. But once it's in, it doesn't really want to go anywhere. So let's get the pen put back together, and let's take let's do a couple writing samples and take a look at the Conklin Duraflex. So for the writing sample, normally I'd use a Rhodia A5 dot pad, but this time we went with the lined ice pad. Still 80 GSM paper, so normal feedback. Now we're going to go ahead and just put the pen through its normal paces. And while I'm writing, I want to go ahead and talk to you about a couple things. So you're going to notice that I'm going very, very slow. There's a reason for that. This is the second nib on this pen. It's actually the second nib housing complete nib unit on this pen. The first one sprung extremely easy. So for the review here, I had to make sure that I went really, really slow so I could gauge how much pressure I was actually putting on the nib and not overdoing it, which on that first nib I got, for some strange reason, was really easy to do. The other thing you've probably also noticed is that I tend to take the pen off screen for a few moments every now and then. And that is for two reasons. The first is to try to get the ink flow back into the feed. And the second is to do a quick swatch on another sheet of paper to make sure that when I bring it back into the frame, it's not dry starting and just completely annoying me. This was actually the fifth piece of paper that we used for the writing review on this pen. Right now, the pen is flowing very well, but it doesn't always do that. So on the other pages, I ended up stopping the written portion about halfway through filming, or quarter way halfway through filming each time, because there would just be way too many hard starts on the page. And I at least wanted to give the pen a fair shake and show that if you get a feed that's writing well, it does very good at what it's supposed to, which is be a fountain pen. But you'll notice here, as I go for the regular writing sample, not really even putting too much pressure on the nib, that the ink variance is drastic. And here in a moment, I even get a skip just on standard writing. And I'm not writing that fast. I would actually say that I write fairly slow. The only time I really got consistent ink flow was when I did the upside down test, like what I'm doing here. Granted, the line is extremely fine, but it is consistent ink flow, which is something it should be able to do when you're writing normally, not just upside down. Now, for this take, you can tell I'm really trying to give the pen the benefit of the doubt. I'm really wanting it to work. And so I just kept writing with it, trying to show you guys this pen can perform. But after I do the figure eights here and I notice, oh boy, we got a partial railroad, I went ahead and pulled it off for a second, did a quick swatch. It wrote well on the swatch. And the second I pull it back, hard start. So at that point, I'm just like, okay, let's see what it does now. Second hard start, well, second skip, really. And so I do one last set of figure eights. And by this point, I'm like, okay, I'm keeping this take, but I'm going to have to take it one step further. So I go ahead, highlight the reason for why I'm getting ready to do what I'm getting ready to do here, which is just show you where we had skipping and hard starts. And I want to try to give it one last good shake. So I shake it here, I give it the swatch, and then I try to do something simple, which is just write my name. The pen should be able to handle writing a first, middle, and last name. And it starts to. Everything's fine. I'm like, okay, the pen's writing. And there we go. Let's just go ahead and finish the last name and move on into an experiment. Disclaimer time here. Anytime you do a modification to your pen, such as removing the feed and nib from the nib unit, or potentially grinding a nib or whatever the case may be, you are taking the manufacturer's warranty and tossing it in the garbage. So as you can see here, I noticed that the Bach number 6 nib on my Keras Pen Co. Decograph happens to be pretty close to the same size as the number 6 nib on the Conklin. I actually noticed this before I did the writing sample, after I sprung the first nib, which is why my fingers have been extremely blue this entire take. So we go ahead and remove the nib and the feed from the Decograph, and I go ahead and remove the nib and feed from the Duraflex. It's going to take a few seconds to do that. Just wanting to make sure I don't actually destroy both feeds. And I want to show you one thing here. So I go ahead and take both nibs, and this is what I noticed when I took a look at them the first time. They're pretty close to the same size, same length, almost same curvature. They look pretty close. So that gets the gears in my head turning. Okay, are they interchangeable enough that I can take advantage of them just being standard friction fit nibs and swap them out? See how the nib performs on a stock Bach feed. From what I saw here and from what I saw before I did the take, it looks like it was going to work. Now, keep in mind, when I did the original look, it was with a nib that had already sprung, so I hadn't done any writing samples yet. This was going to be completely new to me as well. So I line up the nib and the feed, and I go ahead and take about 10 to 15 seconds here to just go ahead and make sure that when I'm putting the nib and the feed back into the housing unit in the Decograph, that I'm not doing it in such a way where I may jam the unit in there or anything of that nature. Because on a Bach unit, even though they're friction fit on the number 6 units, they do have a cutout where the nib actually fits into the housing. I also wanted to make sure that when I did the writing sample here, that I was doing it on a fresh sheet of paper. So I haven't primed it, I haven't shaken it or anything like that. You're actually getting ready to see the only feed priming that I did for the pen, which is just a couple lines here, a couple squiggles there, and we just go straight into writing. First disclaimer here, I know Keras is not spelt with an apostrophe S. So don't leave me any comments about that. The next thing, look at the ink flow I'm getting here. It was such a night and day difference, especially on what I would consider a dry start where the feed really had to re-ink itself after I used a paper towel to pull it and everything. And it's just already flowing beautifully. And there's a reason for this. So the Bach feed is a single channel feed. As you can see here, I'm drawing a crude drawing of a single channel feed. What Conklin tries to do, well, what Jaffa tries to do with the Conklin and Monteverde pens is they try doing a dual feed. Sometimes this is really necessary if you're doing a flex nib, but the problem with the Jaffa feed here is they do it on all their pens. This is the same feed that you're going to get on a fine nib that you're going to get on the flex nib. So the reason this is a problem is Bach, they're doing a single channel nib, but they're doing it in such a way that it actually has a pretty good reservoir in the feed, whereas the Jaffa one, they're trying to do a dual channel with two very, very shallow channels and extremely narrow channels. Whereas Bach, that channel is almost set halfway into the feed throughout the entire feed, and it shows. And just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating or that I was just getting lucky with fluke here, I went ahead and kept writing a little bit with the pen just to make sure I was still getting flow. So I'm not pulling the pen off screen to shake it or write with it on the swatch piece of paper. It's still just the way I put it, just nib straight into the housing, straight on the paper. And I'm not having any issues. The nib suddenly became one of my favorite nibs. And that was on all the pens that I have owned so far. I'd put it in my top 10, not my top 5, but top 10. And here's why. Now that I actually trust the flow of the nib and, the feel of the nib and the flow of the feed, look at how wide I'm able to push it. This right here is actually what I was hoping for when I first unboxed the Duraflex. And it's almost a little disappointing that I had to use a different pen to get the feeling I was hoping for. So that wraps up my review of the Conklin Duraflex. If you want to pick up the pen or just the nib unit, head on over to penchalet.com. And while you're there, don't forget to click on the radio podcast link at the top of the page and type in Inktwell in the How You Heard About Us section. Now, a couple final thoughts here. The Conklin Duraflex has the potential to be a really good pen. It's got good weight, good feel. I love the screw-in converter. But with the feed problems that Jaffa pens tend to have, Stipula, Monteverde, Conklin, I have to give this pen 3 out of 5. The feed really breaks the experience for me and the inconsistency and flow from that brand. Now, the Decoflex here, or any other number 6 Jovo or Bach unit that you can fit this in, as long as you get a good feed, I give it 4.7 out of 5. And the reason for that is it's all going to depend on the feed. I got lucky here and was able to immediately swap it into a Decograph that had a good stock feed. I've never had a feed issue with a Karas Penco pen. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and experiment with this nib in a few other pens to see how that goes. And if you want to see the results of those experiments, be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at the Inktwell, and also follow the blog at floor3media.com/theinktwell or theinktwell.com. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.